let's update our mod to 1.21.2. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Before I dive into the code and show you the changes, I need to mention few things and you should be aware of these few things. So let's talk about these situations and then take a look at what happened in 1.21.2. Remember, the current video shouldn't have been published yet. Between the current video on the YouTube channel and what is the current situation of the recording process, there is this huge gap of 2 or 3 months. In other words, I have recorded videos for the future 3 months. They are uploaded to YouTube and they are waiting to be published. So the code that you are seeing right now is much more progressed forward than what you have on the published videos. What you should do is to take a look at this code and take note from the changes, look into your own mod and see what needs to be changed. Later, when we get to the proper position in coding and in the video sequences, you should be aware that whatever you are seeing between this video and the next 1 or 2 months have been changed, maybe because of the 1.21.2 updates. So if you are following this video tutorial and writing my own code as an example to learn, I highly suggest that you shouldn't touch your code or update your mod right now. Stay tuned and stay on 1.21.1 until you get to the proper point that you need to change the stuff. That's the first thing I need to mention. The second thing is that, as much as I remember, the previous video was talking about refactoring my code. Some huge refactor had happened when you are watching this video. And I will walk you through everything and I will talk about every reason for every change in every refactoring. Some of them was needed for this update. Some of them were just designing of an API and I will talk about them later. So don't forget, if you didn't watch the refactoring video completely, go back and watch it and then come back to this video and remember that again, we are much farther ahead from what we have published in the channel. That was the second thing to mention. Now let's start with the list of changes. Today I published a video talking about the blog post on Fabric MC webpage that was listing changes for 1.21.2. But I'm telling you from experience, that blog post didn't cover everything. This update took around 16 hours for me, provided most of the time I was refactoring my code, I was thinking about providing a new API system to compensate for the changes and make things work the best possible. But if you are fast and if you are watching this video, it will take at least 2 or 3 hours for a very basic mod to change everything. However, I had done the hard job for you and I will tell you how to use it. And things are changed, honestly, in such a way that sometimes it makes things harder for a new programmer. But I am developing a utility class and you can download that utility class from GitHub page. The link is inside Discord channel. You can use that until we get to the point that we create our own library system and then you can just depend your mod on that library and get done with everything. So there are lots of places that changes happen. Now I will commit my changes and I will use updated to 1.21.2. Use this version for the library util classes. So if you are following my repository and if you are forking or if you are pulling down the repository, you can use this updated to 1.21.2 commit. You can just check out and the code will switch to this commit. After finishing the record of this video, I will remove these to-dos and then I will commit another change and I will move you through steps that needs to be done one after another so that you get your system working fast. The very first thing you need to do is to come into Gradle properties and change the versions. Of course, you can get the versions from the template mod builder, or you can just pause the video and use the versions. As you see, the version for Minecraft became 1.21.2, the yarn mapping became 1.21.2 plus build.1, Fabric version became 0.106.1 plus 1.21.2, and loader version became 0.16.7. As you see, I commented out most of my dependencies because lots of them are not being updated yet. PAL didn't update, but I hope that it works yet. If at any future days it changes, follow it and you will update it. JEI is commented out. Cloud Config, Architecture, Terraformer, TerraBlender, Cryptonaut, all of them are commented out for time being. Jade is updated to a beta version and mod menu is updated to a beta version. Badges didn't need an update and it's working, I think. These are the changes that you need to follow and update on your Gradle.properties. On build.gradle, you need to use this 1.8 for the Loom. However, remember, when you are updating Loom, I highly suggest that you go into your project folder. So you should change this number, then close the project and go back to the folder and remove the Gradle folder, the Gradle.bat and Gradle.w and .gradle folder. Remove them and copy these three from the template into the root of the project and then open the project. Because I had seen situations that when you change this Loom number, the Gradle will not work. Just remember to replace those Gradle related stuff on the root of the project with the ones coming with the mod template for 1.21.2. And other than that, you may notice that I added this section and commented out. It's for the templates that use separated solution for the server and client. But as I said, it's commented out because my solution is not one of them. However, I want to keep it there as a template. Other than that, Energy API is commented out. The libgui is commented out. Terraformer Wood, Cryptonaut, EMI, REI, JEI. I added all three of them as compatibility mod. You see that all of them are commented out right now. Jade is working, mod menu is working, badges is working. This fluid utils is mine and it should be deprecated. I will change it to another library in future. I just commented it out and keep it there as a reference for time being. We are not using cloud config anymore. In the gap between the videos, in future weeks, you will see that I will apply my own config system. And the result of that config system is something like this. First of all, it's an INI file extension, and you can have a config like this. As you see, I have comments on a new line. And if I so want to, I didn't do it here, but if I so want to, I can have comments at the end of each line and the system will work. This integer parts and default values are being added automatically. So it's a complete solution for a config file other than the fact that it is not showing up inside the GUI of the game. So I don't use cloud config anymore. And if you notice on runtime usage, I have all three, but I personally moved toward using EMI. I have few EMI related mods added to the mods folder on run just for the fun of it and using them in the game test. However, if I want to use EMI, I just uncomment this, resync my Gradle, and things will work. And I will not use REI anymore. So because I'm not using REI, I don't need architecture, I don't need cloud config, and get done with it because I'm not coding against architecture, so I'm not needing it. And also, I will keep it there just for the mod templates in future because I don't know. You as the user of a mod template may want to use architecture. Other than that, there is no change. However, remember, the blog post told that the loader can now work with version 23, but we should stick to version 21 in both places, both in here and in here, because right now Minecraft is coded against version 21. And this is the build.gradle change. So when you had done these, you should come back to Gradle folder, hit this arrow button and refresh your Gradle. When it's done, you can generate your sources, and that is done with the Gradle. Then you should open something like blocks class or items class from the vanilla. And when you do that, it will ask for sources on top. Right now, it will not ask from me because I had done it. But if it asks for a source, then choose the source and use the proper source version. And that's the process of updating your Gradle. The very first thing that I can talk about, and it is faster to talk about, is the change for fuel. And that's here. If you recall, the fuel system is now registering using events, and the blog post was talking about it. So we changed the things and used the same code snippet that the blog post was giving us. Now we use fuel registry events build.register and add our own listener to this event. And as you see, for 6,400 that I had, I use context.base smelting time. This is 200 multiplied by 32. And that's it. After this one, something that was not talked about inside the blog post, and it is the tool materials. Now remember, in 1.21.1, I think, or it was 1.21, Minecraft moved toward using records for armor material, and we talked that there is a chance that in future it will happen for tool materials. And if you take a look now, tool material is a record. So instead of an enumeration, now it's record, and basically you have to make your tools as a record. However, right now I'm not sure why it's happening. Maybe it will not happen for you, maybe it will happen for you. As you see, the parameter hints are using lowercase single words for me, I, F, G, J. I put this little guide on top that I is durability, F is mining speed, but how can you find it? If you generated the sources and choose your sources, if you middle mouse click on this tool material, open the source, you will see that you have the proper naming for these records. Also, you notice that this red line is presented on top. That's okay. Don't click on this open.class file. Use the same thing that is open for you after generating the sources. And as you see, the fields are named. So the first one is durability, then the speed, then attack damage bonus, and then enchantment value, and then repair item. This one, take note, it's using tags. And this is a big change. We have to use records now. Basically, each one of them will instantiate a new record with the reverse tag. So incorrect for whatever tool. And here we have incorrect for diamond, incorrect for diamond, incorrect for enderite, and so on and so forth. It was there in previous version, so it's not a big deal. We have the durability, then we have the mining speed, then we have the attack damage. This is enchantability. Now you notice that in previous version we had 0 for enchantability. It would prevent our tools from being enchanted. However, Minecraft is changed, and if you have 0 here, and if you try to run the game or generate your Datagen, it will yell at you that this number for enchantability can't be 0 anymore. It happens both for tool materials and armor materials. The enchantability can't be 0 anymore. So I just went on and used enchantabilities that I thought is proper for my materials, and I will talk about how we can prevent our items from being enchanted when we are talking about tags and changes about tags inside the recent version 1.21.2. However, right now, these are the new tool materials. The second one, repair item, now works with tags. If you recall, in previous version, we had something like the ingredient of mod items dot something. Instead, now we use tags. This may look like an overkill, because if you are using a single item, why should you go on and create your own tag and add the item to the tag so that you can put the tag here? However, if you think about mod pack developers, you will notice that using tags opens the door for mod pack developers to change what you're doing in such a way that their mod pack will keep the balance of gameplay. What do I mean by that? I'm using citrine plate, for example, to repair every tool that I have. A mod pack developer may make the decision that instead of citrine plate, he wants to use citrine reinforced plate. In previous versions, they had no way of tweaking this value. Right now, they have tags. They can just come back into the data, UIO tags, and if you take a look inside item, we have these repair things. Repair citrine tool. If I open it, it says plate citrine. A mod pack developer will create a tag, put it under the same hierarchy with the same mod ID under their own data pack, and change this value to whatever they want, and it will work. So it is really a nice change when you think globally about players and data pack developers. That's the thing. We will take a look at how we can make our tags for the repair tool. Basically, they are item tags. There is nothing special there. There are changes in armor material. Again, armor material was using records. Now things are changed a little bit. First of all, if you recall, we had to set the durability inside the constructor of initializing our tool in mod items. We had this mod item, new X item something, and we would put the durability as a parameter there. Now they moved that durability into the definition of armor material. And that makes sense, because if this is the material, the durability should be assigned to the material itself. They are the same values that we were having on our tools. Just move the number from the initializer in mod items into here as the first param. And again, this is the enchantability, J. This can't be 0 anymore. You need to assign a number. I just used numbers that I thought it's proper. And again, for repairing, we are using tags, not the ingredient.of anymore. Same deal with tool materials. Let's talk about these tags and what had changed for tags. If you see now, I have tags for repairing the armor and repairing the tools, and you see that all of them are sitting under the item class inside tags, and they are just creating tags properly. Remember, for each tag that you create, you need to come back into language provider and you need to add translations for those tags. Also, you notice that I have a new tag here that is not related to repairing, but it says the armor type of amethyst citrine and every armor type that I have. I will talk about it because it's a nice way of changing a code that you are not seeing right now, but in future it happens in the series. I will cover it in this video and we will get done with all these refactors. You can come back to this video in future and see what has changed. So those are tags. Basically, tags are simply item tags that we added. both for repairing, and I added tags for the material types for the armors because I will use them in my own code. Other than that, there is no other change under tags for the items or the blocks. There is no change here. Then we go into the mod item tag provider, because when you add tags, it's a good habit of coming back here, immediately assign tags. So if you see, we have these repair armor tags that we add one single item to each one of them, because honestly, we want to have one repair material in our own mod. If you want to, you can add now as many items as you want as repairing, both for the armor and for the tool. Now, this is the material type armor tag. Basically, what I'm doing here is that I'm creating a tag for amethyst armor type, and I'm adding all the 4 amethyst armors under it. And same thing is happening for citrine, copper, emerald, and things like that. And we will come back and take a look at the usage of this in a few minutes. Then we have this section. I think these enchantable tags are new now. I'm not sure. I honestly didn't check the tag system after 1.21. It can be related to 1.21. It can be related to the latest version of .2. However, the thing is that now you can assign things that are enchantable separately. For example, if you want to add equipable enchantments to any item, you can add them here. If you want to add any armor enchantment to any item, you can add it here. And I listed all of them, and you see that chest, foot, head, and leggings have different enchantment tags, because some tags can happen on all armor types, but some enchantments are dedicated to one armor type. For example, I think frost walking is just about foot armor. You can't put frost walk on chest, for example, and those are the tags related to armor. Then we have fishing, bow, crossbow, mace, sword, trident, sharp weapons, and weapons in total. These again will dictate Minecraft what type of enchantment can happen on what item type. Durability enchantment, as much as I think about it, it should be about mending. And as you see, this is one of the few tags that I add my items under. Basically, by not putting my armor under any of these tags, I'm telling the system that my armors shouldn't accept any enchantment. By not adding my sword or axe under weapon or sharp weapons or anything else like sword enchantments, I'm dedicating that my swords and axes shouldn't accept any one of these enchantments. But I added my armors and my tools under this durability enchantment, meaning that now I'm letting the system to add mending as an enchantment to my armors and my tools, and that's it. Also, if you look, mining enchantments, I think it's about speed, but we have mining loot enchantment, and this should be about silk touch or lock. And I let my tools like the excavator, the hammer, the pickaxe, the shovel use silk touch or lock. Honestly, that's the only thing. Fire aspect and vanishing, well, these are extra enchantable tags that you can add to any item. Who knows, in future I may add my fishing rod and my enchantment, and then I will create something there. But on the fishing rod, I may let it accept fishing enchantables. Now let's move toward the events. The one that was easier is this loot table modifiers. And you see that here we were changing the loot table for Enderman, and we were adding our own items into the drop of Enderman. This will happen in future videos, by the way, that you didn't see it. But here is the change that you need to do. If you want to get the registry key of a loot table from an entity type, we had this entity type, the type dot get loot table ID. Now loot tables became optional, so you should use get loot table key instead of ID. And because it's optional, then you need to use or else throw, so that if the key was not provided for whatever reason, it will throw an exception and you will know that. And that's the only change happening inside this event. Of course, when you had the video for this loot table modifiers, then you can come back and take a look at these notes. The other one is happening under server player equip change. Now this is a nice replacement of adding our armor effects on top of the player. If you recall, at the start of the series, we were using our custom armor item and we were calling the inventory tick. That is a terrible code, but at the same time, we didn't know anything about event system, so we had to come back and fix that. Honestly, I can't remember if that video is published yet or not, but it is in few weeks gap, so it may happen in the next week or somewhat really close. And this is the new way. Basically, we are creating our own listener and adding the listener to the server entity events equipment changes. However, in all of that code, I had this has full set method added. At the time I was writing the code, I was thinking and progressing forward at the same time, and I didn't think about using tags. So I was reading and trying to get the material from the items tag and then compare it to a material. So if you look at that code, here we had a material, armor material, and here we were using item.getMaterial.value equals to that material. However, now I showed you that I'm using some tags like emerald armor type. I'm accepting those tags here. For example, if I want to look at enderite, I'm saying that if has full set tags.item enderite armor type. So I'm sending in those materials now, those tags right now, here asking if the armor that I'm equipping has that tag or not. In other words, is in the tag list or not. For example, if I'm equipping an enderite helmet, it will be inside enderite armor type tag. But an iron helmet will not. So I'm just checking the tags here, and if I have all the armors that has the same tag, then I have a full set of one armor type, and then I can add extra effects on top of that. Vanilla changes had an effect on it because the materials on armor item now is components. Previously, materials were a field that you could retrieve. However, these days, if you double shift click and ask for armor item and include non-project items and take a look at net Minecraft item, you notice that armor item is just extending item. There is only a constructor. Now armor material is happening here and calling super. Let's take a look at super. The super call is asks for a setting. It is taking a look and assigning everything, but take a look at here. This dot components equals to settings that get validated components with the model ID. Basically, whatever is being sent here is being converted to a setting, and you can see it, material that applies settings type, and we are adding material into the settings, then we are setting it as a component inside the settings of the item. And honestly, if you take a look at these settings, I think there is no way of retrieving these settings easily from the mod items. In other words, I was forced to do this nice change because I couldn't get the material anymore. But now I'm using tags, and honestly, it's a much better approach because who knows, someone may add their own armor type to be the enderite type to just get the flight effect. Why not? So that is the changes there. And finally, the last change happens inside use entity callback listener. This is where we are right clicking on villagers. And the only thing that is changing, if you recall, the blog post was talking about server world, using server world as parameters here and there, and they emphasized on not doing a typecast. I'm following the lead. I'm asking if the word is instance of server world, calling it SW, and I'm passing that SW instance inside the teleport. And remember, the entity.teleport now asks for a boolean at the end that says should reset the camera or not. In our case, I used false because I don't care about resetting the camera direction or looking direction. So that's one change, and you will see that between these codes, there are times and times that we were using typecast and we should not use it anymore. One of them is here inside tuner item. And as you see, we were using the server word typecast inside the use on entity result. Now we are doing the same thing. We are asking for a server world instance and then passing the method. And also, if you recall, the blog post was talking about changes for action results. This time, the return type of the method for the use actually became action result. And that's something that you should remember. At any item that you are overriding the use method, now you should pass action result. And this happens on few items actually. For example, this is Angel block. Don't worry if you don't understand this code. We will write it in few weeks. But again, the use case is now using action results. And here is the thing, chalice item, again, another example of the code that will happen in few weeks. We are returning action results on the use. In enderite sword, again, this, I don't remember if we did publish this code or not right now. It's just making instant kill of entities and then calling an event. We are using this server word on the server entity combat event here, and we shouldn't do a typecast there. The next one happens in player teleporter use. Again, we are using action result here. There is another change here. When we were using this request teleport, the target had this pause method. Now it's renamed to position, and it's a better naming there. Now there is something that happened here that I didn't talk about, and this is an internal code change. In previous code, I had to look away from a block and then sneak right click to remove the data from the player teleporter. By the way, the data data section of the code has changed a lot. Don't worry about that. It's a custom component type that we will cover in a few weeks. I had made the changes that when I'm not null as a player in use on block, I check if the player is sneaking and we are not on the client side. I will replace the data on the item. Basically, I will make the data clean and then I will return. Actually, I should do it here. So if player that is sneaking is false, I should still check it because the previous code had two sections. It may fail because of the client side, but the player is not sneaking. And if it's not sneaking, then I will follow the use on block. And this part of the code is basically what was injected into the use on block on the player teleporter. Now there is this one change that really took a long time for me to figure out. In the mod model provider under Datagen, if you recall, when we were registering our armor, we would just say generator.register armor with the armor type. That is hugely changed in 1.21.2. It's finally done. So what I did is that I added a helper method, and yes, I moved every helper method out. I will talk about this massive code refactor later in this video, but right now, just sufficient to know that under a subclass, I have this helper method, register armor. This is the new way of registering your armor on the generator. Take note, it asks for the item. That's okay. We already had it. This is the item. However, if you look, it asks for an identifier. Okay, that's not so hard. The problem is this one, equipment model. Well, equipment slot is easy because we are sending in, for example, the equipment slot head, chest, leg. That's okay. However, for the model, things are a headache. And it took me really hard to finally dive into the vanilla, dissect many different classes until I find this code. Build humanoid and horse and build humanoid. Of course, I had to copy paste them here. I don't remember if they were public or private, but the problem is that the code from vanilla is assigning them into the Minecraft namespace for the identifier. So we had to copy them out here and just use our own identifier. Basically, for the model, you send in the name, and the name is name of the identifier if you want to. Then it says equipment model dot builder add humanoid layers for the identifier of the name and ID. This will return a model for humanoid armors. And this one will add another armor on top for the horse. So if you have armors that will cover the horse materials and horse armor type, we will take a look at that in future, but this is the method to call. This is an API that I'm developing. So just remember for the armor models, now you need to use this type of code. Either use the build humanoid and the identifier, I'm just sending in the material. So mod materials.amethyst instead of mod items.amethyst, for example, helmet, because instead of the helmet, now we are using the equipment slots. So I'm using in the material and I will read the ID from the material. Remember, it comes from the mod armor materials. And it will be this name, for example, amethyst. And this is the same thing that we were using for our textures. So you should get it from the material anyway. After reading it from the material, I'm sending it here and I will get the models back and I will just register my armor here. Remember that I'm sending in the item model generator to handle the generation right here, right now. And this is happening for the armor material. So that's our armor material model. Inside models, there are nothing else being changed. Another change that I can talk about is custom or drop. The change here is that honestly the registry lookup changed the name because now it became optional. So registry lookup.get wrapped or throw has changed to registries get or throw for the new version. That is the only change that we have here. However, you may notice that I did move the helper method from the loot table provider into this Datagen under registers because honestly this is a helper method and this is a massive code refactor. I will talk about it in few minutes, and because I did dissect it from the mod loot table provider, now I have to assign the loot table provider and the registries because that's another change. It happens under wrapper lookup registries now for get or throw. And that's the whole change there. The bigger change under Datagen happened to fabric recipe provider. The blog post was talking about not having the generate method under the same fabric recipe provider. Fabric recipe provider now has this protected recipe generator, get recipe generator method. Inside this method, we need to return new recipe generator. And inside this recipe generator class initialization, now we need to override the generate. Basically, every every recipe registration that you had, you just cut them and paste them under this code. And that should work. Also, Fabric Recipe Provider now has this get name. I just returned empty and it works. The bigger changes happened inside the provider. Every place that we had to use offer methods, we were sending in the exporter. So exporter comma something. Now, none of the offer methods need that exporter anymore. So we just remove the exporter comma from the first argument, get done with every offer method call that we had everywhere. That's one thing. The next one, you notice that I'm not using shaped or shapeless recipe JSON builders anymore. Now we have create shaped or create shapeless, as you see, and we can call them. The main change is that the offer2 now is not accepting an identifier. If you recall here, we were sending identifier, we were adding this string as our identifier. Offer2 became simpler and now just accepts the string. So we don't need that vanilla ID identifier creation call anymore. And we directly send in the strings everywhere, even if we have this custom plus shapeless at the end. And that's the big change here. And as you see, there are many places that I had to come back and fix those shaped and shapeless recipes. One thing that I encountered, and it was really bothering me for a few minutes, was the netherite armor. Because I'm overwriting the functionality on how to create armors, I did change the netherite armor, diamond armor, iron armor. However, the diamond and iron and other armors were just JSONs that I copy pasted into my resource folder and tweaked. Netherite, on the other hand, was a smithing recipe. And I did change the JSON for the smithing recipe and nullified that. And now I'm using shaped recipes for the netherite because now I'm using reinforced netherite plates. In vanilla, you had to use one diamond plus one template plus one netherite item. And it would become netherite armor. This time you need to use 16 netherites to just make a netherite armor, and honestly I think I have to add this template somewhere, but I have to figure where. I will use that netherite armor template so that you can still have that mechanic. But the problem is that moving from the vanilla way of creating netherite and using the shaped recipes, the names of the JSON files would be the same. It would conflict with each other. It would yell at you, because if you take a look at crafting recipe JSON builder line 33, it says that if the ID from the item that you want to create and the ID that you are naming your final recipe is the same, it will give you an error that is a little bit misleading. It says that overwrite the save method because it has the same name or something like that. You can take a look at these lines and it will guide you. And that save method makes no sense because, hey, I'm making a JSON. The thing that you had to do was to add a little bit of extra into the name. So here I'm adding the underline shade for the netherite and for the netherite alone. For others, you don't need to do this because they are my own items. And for other vanilla armors, you just have to tweak the JSON files. So the only place that I was using the Datagen for vanilla was the netherite armor, and I'm adding this underline shape to get that fixed. Now in the video about the blog post, I said that they are talking about the item group and some methods on item group, and I was hoping that they gave us some ability to reorder our item groups using some method call. Honestly, either they didn't do it or I didn't find where they did it, because if I put a dot here, I don't see anything like before tab or after tab here, and that makes me sad. The reordering of the tabs didn't come to us in this version of Fabric API. Hopefully it will happen at any time, although I'm just handling my own orders using this identifier name as I talked in some video. That was something that I had to mention. The biggest change inside the recent version of Minecraft, and that is how we register mod items and how we register mod blocks. Before I talk about this one, I have to mention something. I did dissect the registration of block items from registering the blocks themselves, and this means that now we have two different methods to call from mod items. As you look, we have two methods here. Actually, I added more, but the main thing is this: init items and then init block items. The reason is that if I call the block item registration under the blocks, the way we had done it, I didn't have any control on the block items, and I didn't have access to them. So if I had to recall any block item, I had to use registries lookup. The only block item that I was registering manually, and it happens in few videos in the next weeks, is for the angel block. At the time, I did make the decision to move the registration of angel block item into the items class, and then I got aware of a little bit of problem. If you are registering your block item, even one single block item, inside the mod items class, then you have the order of operations to keep in mind. Basically, your mod items had to happen after the mod blocks. This makes things a little bit more complex because who knows, maybe for some reason you want to register the main items of the game before the blocks. But having even one block item inside the mod items class forces you to have this mod items.init after the mod blocks.init. So I dissected the mod items section a lot, and this was a huge code refactor, and it took about few hours honestly to finish. The first part is just your registration of normal items, as you see. That's okay. We will talk about the helper methods in few minutes. Stay tuned to the end of the video. However, as you see, I moved the registration of every block item here inside another method call, and as you see, I had to add many variables for each one of the blocks that I had. Now I have a block item corresponding to that block, and BI is standing for block item, and I'm registering block items here for every one of those blocks. The only block that is different from others is this one, angel block, because I have angel block item, and I will show you how to write the code in few weeks from now on. But keep in mind, we have a single block that has its own dedicated block item. This is one code refactor. We had to dissect the block item from item. And when I was dissecting the whole system apart from each other, I thought to myself, okay, I had this comment sitting somewhere inside the init method to assign items inside a vanilla item group. Why not keep it out of the initialization and into its own method call? Also, we have this code that returns all the items that were registered by our code, and I want to have the assignment inside another method call. Same deal happened for the blocks. So you see that I'm initializing the blocks, then I'm calling the add to item groups, then I'm setting all the blocks. So basically I'm retrieving the blocks registered, and then I'm adding few blocks to the blacklist actually of this list on top. This was one of the refactors that happened both for mod blocks and mod item. Also, you notice that our class has two big changes. First of all, there is no helper method to register items or blocks. Second of all, you notice that especially I finished the items, I didn't finish the blocks. I have to finish them because these, for example, are slab blocks, and these are button blocks, pressure plates blocks. These are fence blocks, fence gate blocks, wall blocks, door blocks, and trapdoor blocks, and this thing can go on and on. Honestly, these are just normal blocks. This one has its own dedicated class. These are right now blocks, but in future they will change and they will have their own dedicated class, just like these items. Now you may wonder how I did manage this. How am I using a dedicated class instead of item and get done with the whole registration? And where is my helper method? That is the massive code refactor that I was talking from the start of video until now. Let's take a look at different things that happen. If you notice, I added this util package. Now in some video we will talk about these configs and we will finish that. And also I will talk about this abstract activated block and abstract directional block, but I expand that behind the scenes and add more abstract classes here. Then I have a new interface, a new record, and these registers and two other helper methods. Honestly, these helper methods are nothing big. This one is just working with pose for, getting the pose related to a direction or everything that is around a block pose, or just horizontally around the block pose, or everything other than the top one. And I have few extras that I'm using the cheat sheet. I will show you the cheat sheet about the direction in a few weeks. And here we are using that get left, get right, get front. So I added these as a helper method here for the block pose. Okay. Also, I have this math helper. It's nothing big right now. I just use an integer, and then I can get a chance as a boolean. So I'm just rolling a dice basically and getting something, and I will say that, hey, if I want 20% chance of something happen, if we got that 20% chance or not. I will use this later, but right now I want to talk about this register. By the way, this coordinate data is something about custom data component, and the video is recorded and uploaded right now. The bigger thing that I want to talk is this register and the interfaces. Basically, this is a massive code refactoring to register our blocks, items, recipes, component types, and some helper methods for Datagen, and I want to talk about them. If you recall, in the blog post that we recorded and talked in the previous video, we talked about the new way of registering items and blocks that are asking for registry key, and these two methods on the top of this registers class is just helper methods that will return the keys. Also, you notice that I did cut and paste the get all item and get all block methods from the mod blocks and mod items here. If you don't know what are these, just watch the video tutorials and move forward. At some point I'm talking about it. I think I already covered it in the code refactor video previous week, so take a look at there. After these, I just added two methods to recall and get the item keys and get the block keys. The vanilla has something like this, but instead of our identifier, it will return the identifier under Minecraft namespace. So we had to write these two. Then the whole massive code refactor is happening. The block entities is nothing special right now. I just cut and pasted the code that I had under block entities registry as a helper method and made it public static, and it's still returning generics. That's okay. This can happen in future. But let's take a look at the Datagen, for example. Now, Datagen has this register armor. We talked about it. It has this custom ore drops. We already talked about it. The overload came here from the loot table provider. And these two methods, already we've talked about them, are a copy of vanilla, and we changed the identifiers. That's the Datagen. The component types, well, we will talk about component types in a few videos later. There, I had this register method as a helper method, and now it is dissected from the registry class and being pasted here and became public static. There is no big change there. The recipes, as you see, is just the cut and paste from mod recipes class. And honestly, this is for custom recipe providers, and we didn't cover them right now. So we will come back to these later. But the biggest change that you should be aware of right now is in the under blocks and items. Let's take a look at items, because as you see, things are happening here. The first one, I created a method for registering food, because we were just doing this register everything, food and max count inside our mod item, and we were assigning it to a food, and we had to do the same thing twice for two different foods. I made this helper method that will create a food and register food for us. Also, I have an overload for it, and I will call it register snack food. Now, this here was called is a snack. The name has changed, and it says always edible, and that's the only thing that is added right before the build to differentiate between a snack and a real food. Now we have few different methods. One is for registering armor, one is for registering the tools. We will come back to these later in few minutes, and I will talk from the top to bottom to cover everything. You notice that I had to register many items using just the name. And every time I was using this register new item and just the same thing. So I made a new helper class for it that only asks for a name. This happened in the previous video for the refactoring of our code. I just put it here under the registers class. And now, based on the guideline of the new changes in 1.21, we had to get the item key here instead of the identifier. And then we have to add this registry key, the key. If we don't add this part at the end of items.settings, we will get a null point exception. So every time you are making a new item settings, you have to add this, and you see that it happens here too, and in many other places. So each time I'm instantiating a new item settings, now I have to add this registry key. Also, I have an overload for this method that accepts a stack count, and I just add the max stack to that stack count on top of this setting, so that for many of the items that, for example, has only one stack count or 16 stack counts, now I call register the name, the stack count, and get done with it. Also, we have this. Now, what is this? Function. These are coming from latest versions of Java. Basically, they are anonymous functions that we can assign into the method call, and inside the method call, we will call that function and we will add parameters to that function, get the result, assign it to some variable, and get done and do whatever we want with that variable. In C# they are called delegates, but honestly, delegates are a little bit different from Java functions, but the main concept is almost the same. How can we use this? If you come down to mod items and find our tools that has dedicated class for themselves, like backpack or ender backpack. Of course, these are right now empty classes. However, the player teleport, tuner item, advanced tuner items, these are written in front of the camera even now. This is that function that is called factory and we are sending in. You had seen it previously or you will see it in future. This is basically calling the constructor on the class, but we are not directly calling the constructor. We are just telling the system that, hey, for this parameter, we want an anonymous function. That function is now sitting under this class with some name. New is a special keyword that is referring to the constructor. So here we are registering a function with a type. Now this type is coming from this part. For example, backpack item, tuner item, chalice item. We are saying that, hey, we have a dedicated type. Please call it T for us. And then we are providing settings for you. Of course, we are not providing settings here right now because we are generating that settings ourselves. But take a note, for the factory, when I'm calling the apply, all I'm doing is just sending in a settings because this method, this function is accepting only one parameter as the settings, and that's it. Sufficient to say, this function call now lets me do something like this. And if you notice, the tuner item is now not an item type, but its own type. Basically, I'm sending in the type, and because I'm using that type to define the type of the factory, now I can call the apply and just provide some settings. I can accept the setting as a parameter and then send in the parameter. However, here I'm just creating the setting myself and just sending in the setting. I can have an overload of this method and I will accept item.settings and I will call it settings, and instead of all of this, I will just, instead of saying new item.settings, I will say settings, and I will assign this registry key because honestly I want to keep things as simple as possible, and I will set the stack count. Also, you can have much more overloads now. For example, you can neglect this stack count and at the end you are not setting the stack count and you are just making the setting and set the key on the settings and send in. For example, if I want to mimic it, I can say that, hey, here I don't want this one, for example. I need to provide a setting there because it asks for a setting. However, I can just make another duplicate and just remove the stack count, So here I just don't have the stack count. And now this shouldn't yell at me. Now it's working, for example. Or alternatively, if I put a comma here, now you see the overloads. I have an overload that I can provide a settings here. So I provided the name, I provide the setting, and then the factory. So here I can say, for example, new settings dot something, and this gives me as much flexibility as needed inside this system. I have a few more methods to talk. One is registering BI for block item. Now you notice that the difference here is compared to this one is that I'm not calling a factory because block items normally are empty block items that we should create ourselves. In one special case that I'm providing a block item, you see that I have a function for that. I will come back to these functions in a few minutes. But in normal cases for items, we were registering the item this way. Now the blog post that we recorded and talked about is telling you that, hey, if there is a block item here, you need to call a new method on the same initialization of settings. And here is that use block prefix translation key on settings, then I register the key, and then I register the whole thing as the item, and I will return a block item from here. I have three methods that are a little bit more advanced, and these interfaces here are related to them. This function interface, that's from Java, by the way. This has a generic type of T with return type of R, and the apply method is using one single parameter. However, we have some constructors for different item types that accepts just more than settings. For example, our armor, we have to provide the armor material. We have to provide the equipment slot. This armor item, if you look, is asking for the material, then the equipment type, then this setting. If I want to provide a factory like before for the armor type, and you see that it's a factory, by the way, I have to change the functionality of this interface. Well, I can't tweak Java, but I can add my own interface. And this is just something like this. You see, it's a public interface function. And yes, I can use this annotation on top of this interface. Okay. And all it's doing is asking the same functionality with two generics. However, I'm changing the apply method. The difference is sitting under this apply. And yes, I'm not adding the compose or add then or identity. I don't need them, honestly. All I'm doing here is I'm changing the apply method to accept the armor material and equipment slot before this generic setting. So that's the whole change there, okay? This is now being used here instead of the function. And of course, we are still asking for item setting and the type of the armor. However, take note, now I'm sending in the armor material, the equipment type, and when I'm calling the apply, I send in the material, the equipment, then the settings. Of course, if I want to, I can make overloads of this guy and I can say that, hey, after these, I will accept an item.settings, call it settings, and here instead of getting a new, I will call settings.blah and get done with another overload for the armor material because I'm developing an API here and I can do whatever I want with that API. Same thing is happening for the item. So tool registration asks for a tool material, a damage and a speed, and then settings. So when I am developing this register tool, I am sending the material, the attack damage, the attack speed, and then I will call my own interface, the generic type. And when I'm applying, I'm just applying the material, attack damage, speed, and new settings. Of course, there is the chance for another overload here, so why not? Right before the function, at the end, I'm asking for item.settings, and I will call it settings. And instead of creating a new setting, here I will say settings.block. And this is another overload here for us. And that's it basically. So for registering block item, again, the same deal. You see that I'm sending in a block and I'm using the same function that I created, and I will get the block and I will call the name before the factory because the name of the block is being used for the block item here. So I will create the block, then new item settings, blah. And honestly, let me break this one here because that's nice. I can have another overload like so, and I will say to send in item.settings, call it settings. And instead of just creating the new item, I will use settings here. And I will get the prefix and stuff like that. This overload is not being used right now, but it will help people because when you are developing an API, you don't know what people may do, and you have to cover every situation to make things life easier because that's the goal of this API. The last one is blocks. Now, this is somewhat similar to what we had seen already in items. So I will pass through it faster. First one, thanks to Zero No Ryoki, because the knowledge for functions and factory design, he was the one guiding me toward using it. So I will keep that here. Also, I will keep this comment because the knowledge base is factory programming and factory design patterns. For the blocks, now we are using the factory, and that's one. Then we have a block copy that we are using to create the new copy of abstract settings. Then we have this one that is sending in the settings. So let's cut that and paste it here. And we are using that settings again. And of course, I need to move things around here. Now we have a register that registers a name, and you see that I'm calling myself name with the block from Minecraft constructor as the factory. And then I have the name and the settings, and basically I'm doing myself again with the settings. And now I have register simple. Register simple means that I'm not gonna register the block. I am providing the type, but I can't use the factory because I don't know what will happen there. So basically I have to create a block myself, send the block in, and then I just want to register the block using the registry key here. It's just the registry with the block key again, and the block we have. Now this one, register simple, is being used for these overloads and helpers, registering the stair, the slab, button, pressure plate, fence, fence gate, wall, door, and trapdoor. Why did I go with this direction? Because if I had to use factories for each one of these are accepting different number of items as parameters. I had to somehow compensate for that. For example, if you see the stair blocks is just block.default state. The slabs block is just the settings, so there is no default state. The button, now it asks for a block set type and an integer. So the number of input parameters are changing, and I had to add more and more into these interfaces just to be able to have a factory. I don't need that. I have this simple registration, and I'm internally creating the instance of the block, and I just named the register method to register stairs, slabs, buttons, and these basically are just registering the different classes as you see. And honestly, there is nothing special here, just some initialization of some classes. There is nothing more here. And that's it inside the massive code refactoring. This utility class combined with the helper methods will make your registering life a lot easier. Now notice that because I'm using the same register tool for the excavator and hammer, I had to change things for the constructors on sword, excavator item, and hammer item. Let's take a look at them. Each one of my sword items, for example, citrine sword, now has to accept 2 extra floats because each item is accepting those floats, and this is extending sword item, and the sword item had these two in the constructor, so I had to add these two. And for the hammer and excavator, I'm not sure if these happen right now or it will happen in the future videos, but keep in mind that they were final, the depth and radius, and they are not final anymore because I did remove them from the constructor. I added their own set methods, and now same thing is happening for excavator. These were finals and they are not final anymore. I did remove them from the parameters from the constructor and I added the encapsulation there. And because of that, now I call the register tool on the excavator, and after everything I just call the setters for the depth and radius like so. And remember, if you take a look, I did a little bit of a smart way of returning the class itself, and this lets me chain the commands like this after the registration end, because the registration end will return the instance of the class, and I can add commands on top of it because I'm returning the whole thing again. So that's the change of constructors for sword, excavator, and hammer. And finally, when I'm registering different tools, these are just coming from vanilla this time, and vanilla changed the tool materials name to tool material. So it was tool materials.diamond, for example. Now it's tool material.diamond. And of course, for the armors, if you take a look, I'm just registering the armors using register armor with the material type at different equipment types. And that's basically the massive code refactor. One thing that I forgot to mention is that on or and the right, again, this happens between the episodes. I'm not sure if I covered it or not yet. I don't think so. We have this undestroyed by explosion. This was using a word. It's now using the server word. So it's by default accepting the server word. That's the change on the method call. And one last thing, I had done all of this. It took me around, I think 16 hours to do all the refactoring, all the factory generation, all the code refactoring on the mod items, mod blocks, everything, dissecting block items from mod blocks into the mod items, finally arranging the order of the operations here. So you see that register the armor materials and tool materials, then I register the normal items, then I register the blocks, and then I register the block items, and finally at the end of everything I just set the blocks and add them to groups, then I just set the items and add them to groups. That's the order of operations right now. They have comments on the GitHub repository, you can take a look at them. I did all of this massive code refactoring. I was ready to test the game. I had to run the Datagen because remember, one of the biggest things that changed were tag builders, recipe providers. You have to run the Datagen. The funny thing was that my tags was messed up. I saw that my tools, for example, are registering under UIO, but when they are adding to the tags, they are sitting under Minecraft, and that didn't make sense. So I tried to regenerate the Datagen, same problem whatsoever. Finally, I got fed up and deleted this whole generated folder, nuked it completely, ran the Datagen one more time, and everything now is okay and works like charm. So if it happened for you, because if it happens, then when you want to run the game, you get tons of errors about missing tags and then maybe the game crash. If that happens to you, just delete this generated folder completely yourself manually, run the Datagen again, and then check if the tags and other new things like recipes and armor models and things like that are working properly and generated properly or not. And then you are ready and the game will come up and you run the game. And here is the thing. Now you need to sit back and do a massive gameplay test, meaning that for each thing that is functional in the game for your mod, you have to sit back and test that thing. For example, if I have a player teleporter, I should sit back and I should check that player teleporter. It should teleport me in the dimension, between the dimensions, from huge distances, when the chunk is loaded or not loaded, and different ways of testing that item. Same thing for tuner or advanced tuner or even elevator. And if I have swords that has some functionality, I have to sit back and test those swords. I have to sit back and test the item loot drop and anything else actually. If I have blocks that should be directionally rotated when they are placed on the board, although they didn't change in superficial way, but you should sit back and test them because something, by the way, had changed and I forgot to mention about that one, and that is the direction property now is changed to enum property direction, and I totally forgot that one, and that's one thing that you need to set. Finally, you have the time and effort to sit back and test your gameplay. At the end of massive gameplay and testing everything related to your mod, the ore generation, yes, it didn't change, but you should sit back and test it. Your command, your items, your tools, your armor, your player effects, everything. If everything was ready and working, then you can publish your mod for 1.21.2. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.